What if there was more to the story than an iceberg and a faulty assumption that the ship was unsinkable? What if the accident was orchestrated to remove the powerful and wealthy rivals of J.P. Morgan, one of the men that owned the Titanic? If this were true, what could possibly be worth the lives of more than 1,500 people? Why would he do such a thing? Is there evidence that points to such a plot? It is important to understand everything that was happening behind the scenes and all the facts before deciding whether or not this could be true. The level of influence and wealth involved is staggering, and the more questions you ask, the stranger the facts become. So, is there more to the story about the sinking of the Titanic? Who are the players and what are the facts? J.P. Morgan, one of the most ruthless financiers of the age, was a strong proponent of the development of an organization that had yet to be built, the Federal Reserve. He believed that the Federal Reserve was not only a good idea, but a necessary one. He and his bank had to personally organize and oversee the bailouts of many smaller banks and businesses, using his leverage and clout to convince others to go along with his plans. He believed that a central bank system would ease the stress of the large banks that were at the mercy of bank runs caused by smaller banks and market forces. J.P. Morgan wanted a private version of the Federal Reserve as opposed to a government-controlled Federal Reserve, which was being proposed at the time by progressives in Washington. Only professionals and expert bankers should be in charge of the central bank, not government bureaucrats, thought Morgan. He was in favor of and a vocal proponent for the private Federal Reserve option. Other wealthy and influential members of society were opposed to the development of the Federal Reserve in opposition to J.P. Morgan. 3 of these people were Jacob Astor, Benjamin Guggenheim, and Isidor Straus. Isidor Straus was co-owner of Macy's department store with his brother Nathan. Benjamin Guggenheim was a wealthy Jewish-American businessman. Jacob Astor IV was the 4th generation of wealthy Astors who dealt in real estate, among other business concerns spanning the United States. Jacob Astor was the wealthiest person on the Titanic when it sunk and was, in relation to GDP, one of the richest men to ever live. These men, and many others, were opposed to the development of the Federal Reserve Bank, thinking that the system would give the bankers too much power. The bankers, including J.P. Morgan and the Rockefeller family, already had far too much power in their opinion, and they did not want to give them any more leverage. The Federal Reserve would do just that, and they were in vocal opposition to the idea. Having wealthy business rivals and strong personalities with differing viewpoints isn't uncommon in the world of high finance. However, the fact that these disagreements exist isn't enough to imply that the crashing and sinking of the Titanic was planned and coordinated by J.P. Morgan. Interestingly, when you dig deeper, you find a string of coincidences, incredible luck, and stories that don't quite line up, particularly when it comes to J.P. Morgan himself. What kind of coincidences and luck, you may ask? Well, while J.P. Morgan was scheduled to be on the Titanic for her maiden voyage, he abruptly canceled his trip at the last minute. Why was he not taking this momentous and grand voyage? He was supposedly ill. Fast forward 1 year, the year after the sinking of the Titanic, the Federal Reserve was created. With much squabbling in Washington about the details of the Federal Reserve Act, it passed, and the Federal Reserve was born. J.P. Morgan's vision of a Federal Reserve Bank controlled by bankers was not exactly as he would have wanted it. There was some federal government control wielded by the appointees to the Federal Reserve Board, but their control of the actual operation is limited. Some elected representatives were critics of the act and stated as much after it had been passed by Congress. President Woodrow Wilson himself, who helped form the bill and used much of his political capital to get it passed, eventually came to regret signing it. He said this near the end of his life. "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world. No longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men." It would seem J.P. Morgan got his way after all. The Federal Reserve was created with minimal oversight from the federal government. He would never live to see the Federal Reserve in action, as he passed away in 1913, the same year the bill had passed. The question remains, did he have a direct hand in making sure that the opposition to this massive change in the U.S. financial policy was silenced? Would he go to such lengths to ensure the completion of this institution? Was it a string of coincidences and bad luck that led to one of the worst maritime disasters in history? Or were there more sinister motives at work? The truth to these questions may never be fully clear. The only certainty is this: deep at the bottom of the ocean lies the wreck of one of the most magnificent ships ever to be built. An unsinkable ship that met its fate one frigid April evening, taking with it 1,500 souls and a mystery